Greetings, bloggers, vloggers, followers, and potters. Dustin here with Dustin's Dynasty. Here again with another edition of this week's vlog. If you haven't been around me long enough or you have just coming here, my name is Dustin. I'm autistic and I have mental health challenges. I'm a middle-aged autistic man that has mental health challenges, so to say. And I've been living on my own for almost 8 years now, and I've had a part-time job for over 16. So, without further ado, we're going to navigate into today's vlog. And today we're talking about disability pride, about owning our disability, or about realizing that I had to realize about a year ago that I have to accept that disability is a not a shameful word, not a bad word. And as we're navigating into what is now known and what has been started in the 90s here in Massachusetts specifically, but overall in America, as the Americans with Disabilities Act has it was signed to law by the former president George Bush in the 90s, um, you know, owning the fact that having rights as a disability and, owning the disability card, but not using it as an excuse to get out of things. And I think sometimes it was hard for me to admit that I had to say, okay, I have a disability. I have issues getting to life-sustaining and thriving activities that help that I need to use resources that are there. And I think what had all this had all well, things have happened in my life that made it necessary for me to admit. But I think in essence, people have to understand, there was this create content creator last year or earlier this year that said that there's no support after you leave public school, how there's no IEP, there's no 504. And while there can be a 504 in post-secondary and there can be supports, we also have to realize too that there are supports that are needed, even for individual disabilities, such as myself, and for me, it took until I was 40 to realize, hey, I need these things because of my disability. It's not that it's making it so much that it's not a fact of wanting or not wanting, it's a fact of making it equal and providing equal access to things that can sometimes be hard for me. And it was always hard in a sense to see that having a disability is not just a way of getting out of things, but a way of making things easier for me and a way of accepting that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to have things easier so I can enjoy them and not have as much stress or as much overload or as much anxiety or as many of those things, even though people want to, say that autism is not a disability or that mental health is having mental health challenges is not a disability. Well, those things can be challenging in their own way. And almost a year ago, I experienced that and how, having having a disability, having to say that I need additional support because of things like the Americans with Disability Act that provide special transportation accommodations for people who need them and need to access services without causing, an undue burden on myself. And in fact, last year it could have caused a very, burden when one avenue of funding ran out for transportation, and there was a lot of anxiety, there was a lot of avoidance, to realize that, yeah, I could access the public bus system, but there were challenges in doing that. There was anxiety that was produced. There was things that were happening that made it hard. And I knew this, and I tried public transportation, but it didn't work for me. And as such, there were already things that were happening, even though I had believed they were from another funding stream, like for work, for example, that were already under the Americans with Disabilities Act. They were already a part of what was the work that was happening, even though I knew what the rules were, I knew what the specifics were of the program, and that knowing that I could meet it, but it was understanding that it was under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And for those 5 or 6 months, as 5 months or so of the year until things got shored up with funding, and considering that, day services, for example, was the real issue, that they are covered under the medical thing now. But those 5 months helped bring that reassurance and that safety. But it also knew that, I mean, also made me see that it's okay to admit that you're disabled and need a little help with things, even though you don't give the look, or that I didn't give the look. Okay, well, disability is not visible, and there's indivisible disabilities. And, it's not always the same every day, and it's not always the same all the time. And, that helped too. But what also helped, and we could carry this conversation on next week, is that just because someone parks like in a handicap space somewhere, or that someone, it's not your place to make the judgment. Do they need that? Do they need that handicap space? Do they need that single user restroom that may be for families or disabled adults, or that a family restroom? I don't necessarily like the word family. And as you can see, if I tilt my head in this picture, you'll see, let's get the finger on the right side, but you'll see that, this picture here of this restroom building that I showed today has this restroom right here in the middle, right where I don't know if I can get a pointer, but you see that middle door there? It has, a restroom that is considered family or unisex. And those words may mean very well mean well. They may very well mean well. They have the sign, if I tilt my head or bump my body in a way that you can see it, that it's for both male and female, or whatever gender that you may feel that you are, that may not be specific for males. It may not be specific for females. And in some moments, I very well feel confident. I feel comfortable using the restroom that is assigned to my gender, that I feel comfortable in. I'm a proud male. I'm proud to be a male, and sometimes I'm pretty confident in going into the men's room. But there are times when I need a little more privacy, a little more space, and things are a little too much, and I need to calm down. That maybe, maybe the family unisex handicap, whatever you call it, toilet may be more, suitable for my needs. And as such, in leading the force behind this, we have a restroom like that at our day services, that was put in by a previous entity that was in the building before we moved in 10 years ago. And it has a shower for the purpose that it was intended for, as well as a toilet and a sink, other than the standard genderized restrooms. And I call it inclusive because it's inclusive of everyone's needs. Now, some people may say disabled toilets because maybe in the United Kingdom, for example, or in England, that's used as a word. And there's often times where people can pass their judgment on people with indivisible disabilities as to why you're using a disabled toilet without fully understanding the story, and why to explain the story. And again, that story really isn't anybody's business. Just as long as you know you need it yourself, you own it up to yourself, that you struggle with going into maybe a multiple occupancy bathroom, maybe, as autistic adults, or as adults with special needs, maybe, having an experience maybe where men or women, for example, may not be able to well, specifically men may have barriers in understanding the mechanics, the social norms of a multiple occupancy restroom with urinals, toilets, that sort of thing, and why is it important, the importance of having a restroom like that. But, seeing people use it, and people often want to make assumptions about those things. And it's important for people not to have assumptions about those things, why we use them. And for us as disabled individuals, and me admitting that I'm disabled, sometimes I may be able to go into the gender specific multiple occupancy restroom, and sometimes I might need the single occupancy disabled inclusive unisex family toilet. That is what it's there for, and I'm grateful for it, because probably 20 some years ago, those weren't really a thing. And we started to see more of those pop up, like the Walmarts and the state parks where I got this picture and things like that. Those things didn't become a reality until decades ago. And now, being an adult, being a middle aged, there was times maybe where that could have been better for me, instead of having to understand the social narratives, the social norms of going into a public restroom that may accommodate multiple people. So those things matter. And so when we're doing things like that, and we're using special buses, and we're using special restrooms and special things to help us make life easier. It's what it's about. It's not about, in conclusion, saying that I'm disabled isn't a way to get out of something. It's a way to make it easier for us, make the day go smoother for us, and take off the burdens that we have to carry if we would have to do things the way that the rest of the world experiences. And even it was about a year ago, as it was hard to admit that I needed that, and not even knowing that for almost 2 years that was already existing, and those it's being grateful for those things, and why disability matters, and why having that and using that as a way of getting the support you need, and not having shame in the support that you need to get those things that you need, like the bus accommodations, the seating accommodations, the restrooms, those sort of things are necessary sometimes. And for me, I had to realize at 40 years old, there was no shame in having that. Sometimes, it's not all the time, and the disability it's not a place for someone to judge. We'll move on to this next week as we continue our theme in Disability Pride Month. But as far as it goes, the main thing I want to leave you with today is it is our place to say it's okay if we have special needs, and or autism or mental health challenges that make it look like we don't want to believe we're disabled, or we don't want to accept it. But sometimes there's just a necessity of accepting it, and it's also understanding that as a person who would see us and not see the whole story, to be patient with us, be kind with us, be understanding. Just see us as a human being, though, but understand us just as we are. So, with that being said, I want to thank you for listening today. As always, be sure to like this video, tap that notification symbol, and be sure to follow or subscribe to everything. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, Pinterest, TikTok at Dustin's Dynasty. I'm on the web. That address is www.dustinsdynastyusa.com. And if you forgot any of that, you can go to the link tree and Dustin's Dynasty after link tree, and find all my links, all my email signups, everything that you need to see and follow my content. I want to thank you for listening. Let's have a great holiday weekend. I know some of us are celebrating independence. In fact, our nation, the United States, is celebrating 250 years tomorrow. As always, remember, you matter, you are loved, you are enough. Have a good weekend, everyone. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk at you soon. Bye for now.